Thank you for listening to Right Jokes, Wrong Times. Today I was joined by Christopher Breckell. You can follow him on Twitter at BreckellGarbage or Instagram at Freckle. We started the podcast with me asking him about a joke of his that's worked well on stage. I've seen sometimes kind of the way that you digest jokes and you kind of roll with things really funny and in a way that I usually don't. So I'm actually excited to see kind of the jokes that you want to discuss. So I asked you to think about a joke that you have that works on stage. What do you have for me?
Yeah, this one is funny. Out of, I think the three that you asked me to do was one of the hardest to think about because...
Really?
Yeah, because, you have like a joke that works, 99% of the time, and then the one time, it doesn't work, it always sticks out in your head. I think I was kind of in between a couple jokes of ones that I use regularly and things like that. But one that I go to pretty often if the room is difficult or I'm losing them or whatever is a joke I do. It's a sex joke, so that's always,
Right.
That's always one that's relatable. And
wait, your go-to joke is a sex joke?
it's not even really a sex joke, I guess. I guess it's more of a masturbation joke. It's a joke I do, and I'm sure you've heard me do it, is the horniness versus loneliness.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty go-to for me because I think I don't know, people just tend to like relate to it. I think it's a pretty relatable feeling, and it's also, I don't do a whole lot of like sex stuff in my acts. I think it's like surprising to people as well, like when I start to go into that. But I find that it's pretty reliable on getting a good pop. So if sometimes I open with that joke, I haven't opened with that in a while. But usually if if I'm starting to feel like I'm losing them or something or whatever, I'll do that joke. And it kind of like flows in. It's kind of what I use to get into a larger chunk of material too, like that bit.
Right.
And that leads into like, I guess like 3 other jokes. So it's kind of a good segue into some other material.
Okay, so how the hell do you go from like you say you don't talk about sex or like in this case masturbation a lot in your set, but it's a great segue into your other stuff. So it's easy to segue out of that joke into other stuff. I guess into a girlfriend, if you're then going to talk about.
Well, the joke starts like, I talk about, sometimes I think that I'm lonely, but I could easily just be horny because I think they're easy to get mixed up, right? And so like, I'm talking about that. So that kind of, it's not so much of like a sex joke as like an insecurity joke, and like it kind of reveals quite a bit about me as well, as far as like me being like single and then maybe thinking, feeling lonely but not lonely. It kind of puts me in the middle of those two, and so then I can talk about it. So then I start talking, like I go from that joke to talking about dating to talking about like a specific relationship. So it does kind of like segue into like me talking about, I guess, like my romantic life in a way.
Can you gauge the reaction of the crowd? Like, do only virgins not laugh? You look out and it's like only pale kids don't laugh at that.
You know what's funny? I find that women laugh at that joke a lot more, like a lot harder than men do sometimes. And I don't know exactly why that is, but maybe it's just like a shocking thing or whatever for like me to be saying it.
They're like, wow, him. He's saying this?
I guess how that joke kind of ends is I'm like, what I'm talking about is like you thinking that you're lonely and then you masturbate or whatever, and then you realize that you're just horny and you're glad that you have space to yourself and you don't have to deal with someone else being around you and stuff. And I think that like that's a pretty relatable feeling to both men and women. So that's kind of why I like it. It tends to go over well. I've definitely done that joke before, and it hasn't gotten the best reaction, but typically that's a case of me either messing up the wording or the timing, and like that's usually the biggest thing there. But it's one of the more consistent ones that I would do.
Well, I'm going to be honest, man. I was like really interested to ask you about how you write, specifically the joke that you thought was like a good joke of yours on stage.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to know how you wrote this one, dude.
Yeah.
I think I'm good. So I think I'm going to move to the next section.
That's
which
hilarious.
is,
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Pretty much did the situation,
God damn it, stop calling back.
yeah.
So I asked you to think about a joke of yours that you wrote that didn't work on stage. So what do you have for me there?
Yeah, well, for those, I got like a billion and two that I could give
Yeah.
you. With this, I decided to go with a joke that actually works about 50-50. And it's a joke
Okay.
that honestly, 50-50 is probably giving it better than it really is. It's probably more of like works a fourth of the time.
How many times would you say you've done it?
I've been working on this same bit. It's a longer bit too. It's like at least like a 5-minute chunk. Maybe not
Holy
quite
shit,
five,
dude.
but maybe like it depends on what version I do of it, but like it's at least hitting like 3 minutes. And it's something that like I absolutely like love. I love to like talk about it, and it's really funny to me, like the imagery of it, and it's just something that like floats around in my brain a lot. But I can't. It's such a difficult thing for me to get people on board with, and then to once I have them on board, to keep them on board with that like line of thinking.
Okay.
There's like like I'm one of those people that like if I'll write something and I'll go try it at an open mic, like, maybe like up to 3 times. And if it's not clicking after like the 3rd time, I quickly, like, it's typically that I throw it aside or whatever and like move on.
Right.
Which isn't great. I should probably keep on digging in that material, but like it just kind of, I lose interest in it a little bit. But there's so many, like there's probably like countless amounts of jokes that I've done like twice at an open mic, or maybe even just once at an open mic, and I was like, whoop, nope, that's not happening. But this joke in particular, it's a long chunk about like, and you probably have seen me do this one too. It's about sea turtles and like plastic bags.
Yeah.
And that one's very difficult because I'm being sarcastic. Obviously, it's like satire, and I'm blaming essentially, like the human polluting the world and stuff on sea turtles and animals and their ability not to adapt to it. So like I have to get people, and it's weird because a lot of my material, it's different from a lot of my other material too. So like usually I haven't done that joke even in a while. Of course I haven't done it now because of the pandemic, but I haven't done it in quite a while. But it's usually something if I have people on my side and like I am being pretty like off the cuff and I'm being like silly and they're going with all of that, like the audience is, then I'll do that joke and I can usually get them. But like if I just try to do that joke like starting off, like the first joke I do in a set, it's very difficult for me to get people on board with that. And I think because you kind of have to like suspend your reality and like your beliefs and kind of buy into this like silliness and this like weird thinking.
I could actually picture, because I've heard it, like 2 sea turtles, like one of them's like reclining, I think, right? Or
yeah,
no? Do you ever say they're
I start talking
reclining?
about sea turtles like hanging out in the ocean, and
Yeah, I can picture it. It's
yeah, and
very
that's why I
vivid,
like it.
guess.
Like it's fun to me, and then I have like I do stuff at the beginning when I'm talking about plastic bags, and I kind of I talk about like when we started making plastic bags, and that being in the 70s, and they've been around for so long, and like sea turtles should know by now what they are, and it's like I think I don't it's like sometimes I'm just a little winded about it too, and like I just lose people, they're just like what is he talking about? And then other times I can like get to the point pretty quickly and like be a little more concise about it, but it's really about me. That's like a joke I really have to like feed off the audience. Like I have to, and it was a problem when I first started doing the joke too, is I would lose confidence in it and I would bail out of it instead of just like really doubling down and like being in it. And whenever I'm like really in it and like convincingly saying it is usually when I get the crowd on board. But if I try to like that's a joke that you cannot half-ass. Yeah,
you can't half-ass the natural selection of sea turtles. That's good to know.
Yeah,
it's good to know.
Or you know what I mean? Like how like the audience can read. Like if they feel like you don't believe what you're saying, there's no way they're gonna laugh at it. And so it's something I really gotta like convince people that I'm doing this. Like this is serious, and we're gonna go through this whole thing, and I'm gonna personified sea turtles and plastic bags, and then I end up like personifying birds and some of it. I talk about like I've done versions of that joke where I talk about like 4 different animals in it. Like so it's just, but it's one of those things that I'm just like in love with, and I'm like I can just continuously write about it kind of and like build it, and So it's one of those things that I just keep in the act. But if I'm doing like a 5 minute spot where I'm trying to like, impress someone or like get booked at a club, I'm not doing that joke.
You got to move it along a little bit more. All right. Well, speaking of moving it along, I also asked you to think about something that you're trying to write about now. So, and that's a kind of a broad thing to ask, but what are you writing about now?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm doing COVID stuff because it's
Yeah.
just what's on everyone's mind, and that's a weird, it's topical stuff like that. It's always kind of easy because I mean, not easy, but it's nice to have in like your set because it's something that like everyone can relate to and like immediately know what you're talking about. So it's a good way, and also it's such on people's minds right now where it's a good like icebreaker when you get out there, but it's kind of boring. I don't want to talk about that, but like what other things I'm trying to write right now a lot about my like living situations in the past and like past like landlords I've had, and I'm currently trying to find a new place. So I think my brain is kind of like in that mood of
Right.
and I've just lived in some really shitty places in the past. Some like real like kind of like horror stories of waking up to like water dripping on my head from like leaky ceilings, and I've lived in places with like rats. One time like the roof caved in from water damage in a place I lived in, and I used to have a landlord that lived below me.
You had a landlord that lived below you. That's a land devil.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really fun. Yeah, that's kind of where like this. I was having a conversation with a roommate I lived in that place with, and we started like reminiscing about that landlord because she was just like she's kind of like this like crazy old cat lady, and every
Right.
night at like midnight she would come out and like call her cat Midnight. Her cat's name was Midnight, and for like 30 minutes she
No,
would
that's
just like yell
creepy.
Midnight.
No.
But it was funny because she would like call us to complain about issues that were happening in her place. And that's what's so funny to me. Like there was water pouring, I guess like leaking into her into she we lived on the top unit and she lived below us. And so there was water like leaking into her unit. And she called us and was like, "There's water pouring into my living room." And I'm like, "Oh my God, let me call my landlord." Like, I don't know what else to, and like so that's kind of where
Let me
like
summon him.
what yeah like they are the landlords, the one calling me complaining about this water, but I'm like, what do you want me to do about it? You're the one who I would call in this issue. I don't own this place.
Oh, wait, the landlord called you?
The landlord called me about
What am I supposed to do? You're the lord of this land. I don't
yeah
know.
exactly. So it was a very strange thing, but I guess like I typically am writing about things that are actually happening in my life or whatever's like bothering me is usually what I'm end up writing about. I don't know. I feel like that's a lot of comics though. It's like either things that are really prevalent in the news that are like on my mind a lot, or things that are happening in my life that are. I mean, pretty much my whole set is just like me talking about my life through the perspective of like someone in their mid-20s. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of like what I'm seeing with everybody is everybody's like, yeah, I just write about me. And I've kind of found like I tried to avoid that at first. I was kind of, oh, I guess I still am. Jesus, very gimmicky. But it's a lot easier and more comfortable to kind of slip into stuff that it has to do with you rather than be like, hey, Sour Patch Kids, like
Yeah,
it's
that
hard
is true.
to,
It's easier to write about you. Also, like comics are narcissist, and like so we just want to talk about ourselves anyway. I think there's an element of that. But like I think things are just more real, and you can like be more. I think like one of the biggest things for me and like a lesson learning like in comedy is like I need to be attached to my material in one way, like emotionally attached to it, either like
right.
through a point of like anger or like happiness or whatever sadness, and like I need in order for me to like sell it for lack of a better word to the audience, like I have to be emotionally connected to it. And sometimes if I'm just talking about whatever like the movie theater, it's more difficult for me to
Right.
emotionally connect to it. And I use the movie theater as a reference because I do have like a chunk on like dollar theaters, but
Right.
it's harder to like for me to like get into the mindset of being like I guess like mad about it or upset about or whatever kind of things I need to like emotions I need to generate. If it's not like connected to my life currently, it's hard for me to do it, which is why I probably throw away material semi quickly. I mean, there's some jokes that have been in the act for like over 2 years, but there's other things that
Right.
will come and go in like 6 months because I wrote it, I enjoyed it, I said it, and then I just stopped caring about it, and I can't really like deliver it anymore.
Did you throw out your emo phase or?
Oh, I did have a big emo phase in like sixth grade. Did you know that?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. When I was in like sixth grade, I dyed the hair black, got like a spiked belt. I went all in.
Would you take the hair back if you had to have that hair the rest of your life? Would you take it back?
I mean, I guess yeah, I would take having hair again. That would be dope.
But like specifically that, just always perfectly,
This was pretty
whatever.
bad. I don't know if you've ever heard of the band From First to Last, but
oh yeah,
Sony Moore. I pretty much took that photo into a hairdresser and said, "Give me this," and they did it, and it was not a good look for me.
All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up on that. That's a perfect place to end it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, thanks for doing this with me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. It's always fun talking about comedy. Thanks for having me.